Good morning, everyone. Think you can hear me okay? The sound is good, more or less. I hope. Uh, okay. I want to start off this morning by reading just a short passage from a great teacher from the Korean Buddhist tradition. His name was Wonhyo. And if you're not particularly familiar with Korean Buddhism, one good place to start would be with Wonhyo. Wonhyo. Here's what he had to say once. Since there is no path to be traversed, there is no way in which to cultivate one's mind. Since there is nothing to be used as a gate, one cannot walk through it. Yet even though the ocean itself has no ford that's like in a river, like where there's a place where the water is very low and you can walk across the river. So yet even though the ocean itself has no ford, people can cross over it with a boat and an oar. Also, even though the sky does not have a ladder, birds spread their wings and fly high above. By this we know that pathless path means that anything can be a path, and gateless gate indicates that anything can be a gate. Since there is nothing that is not a gate, each and every phenomenon can be a gate to lead to the mystery. Since there is nothing that is not a path, each and every place becomes the road leading back to the origin. I'll read that again. Since there is no path to be traversed, there is no way in which to cultivate one's mind. Since there is nothing to be used as a gate, one cannot walk through it. Yet even though the ocean itself has no ford, people can cross over it with a boat and an oar. Also, even though the sky does not have a ladder, birds spread their wings and fly high above. By this we know that pathless path means that anything can be a path. Gateless gate indicates that anything can be a gate. Since there is nothing that is not a gate, each and every phenomenon can be a gate to lead to the mystery. Even though there is nothing that is not a path, each and every place becomes the road leading back to the origin. Okay, I like that. But I want to talk about a story. This is a weird story. And I've probably talked about this before in other Dharma talks, and I don't expect people to clearly remember everything I've ever said in a Dharma talk or anyone else, because I can barely remember it myself. But this is an interesting story that Hakuin told, and it there's actually some basis for believing that at least parts of the story are true, even though it's a very strange story. And Hakuin was a great teacher who lived. I think he died in the 1780 or something like that. So he's not like an ancient, Buddhist teacher. He's from fairly modern times, but very important and influential, especially in the Zen tradition. But one thing that Hakuin did in his career as a teacher is he traveled around a lot, and he taught many lay people. Many of his students were lay people, and many of the teachers that he gave a transmission to and empowered to teach were lay people, including lay women. And so one of the things that he would do as he traveled around teaching, well, actually there were two things in particular that he emphasized. He would go to places, kind of like Zen teachers do today. And if there's a group of students in a town or village, they would host him, hold a retreat. He would give, maybe, in addition to leading the retreat, he would give public talks. And there were two things that he would emphasize. One was the famous sound of one hand, koan. He would teach both to both to his own students, and when he was speaking in public, he would talk about that. And then also, in particular, he would also encourage people to practice the Kanzeon chant. The Kanzeon Namu Butsuyo Butsu En Yo Butsu En Buposo En Jo Rakuga Jo Chonen Kanzeon Bonen Kanzeon Nennen Jushinki Nennen Fudishin. And so, so one place that he went to was a place called Takayama. And there was a group of people in Takayama who were students of Hakuin, and one of them attained, during one of his visits, one of them attained a great kensho, and here I'm going to use air quotes, past the sound of one hand koan, and any of his students who passed this koan would get a certificate. And these are very famous, the dragon staff certificates, they're called. And so this one this one student of Hakuin's in Takayama was very prominent in the local community, some sort of a business person. And after Hakuin had left town and given Sosuke, something like that is his name, given him his certificate, Mr. Sosuke, sometime afterwards, the people of Takayama woke up, and Mr. Sosuke was gone and left town in the middle of the night. And not only was he gone, but a lot of money was gone too. Money that did not belong to him, but that he had access to as a prominent local businessman. Funds that had been entrusted to him by other local business people. And so this caused a great scandal in Takayama. And in particular, there were a group of local Buddhist teachers who weren't particularly happy about this. A non-local teacher who had so many students and so much attention, they thought, why do we need some famous teacher from out of town coming in here? There are perfectly good Buddhist teachers right here in Takayama. What do we need with this Hakuin guy? And so the story goes that the local teachers started spreading negative gossip about Hakuin, and basically saying, look, here's this guy, supposedly enlightened, received his dragon staff certificate, and what does he do? Turns out to be a thief. And one thing that happened in Takayama as a result of this was that many people who had been chanting Kanzeon, because they had been taught that practice by Hakuin, and because now apparently many people were coming to think that Hakuin's teaching was no good because this prominent student of Hakuin's had behaved so badly. They said, well, the practice must be no good. And so then then it gets weird. Okay, this is where the story gets strange. A local boy named Yukichi suddenly started acting very strangely. And in fact, he became possessed by the the great kami. So Yukichi, I mean, Takayama, the had a local Shinto temple dedicated to one of the great kami of Japanese Shinto. Kami is so people get a little funny about exactly how kami should be translated into English. Kami, and so sometimes people translate it as God or goddess or spirit or whatever. But whatever a kami is, some sort of a spiritual being, some sort of a spirit or God or whatever. The great kami of Takayama began speaking through this 14-year-old boy, Yukichi. And he told the people of Takayama to gather together at his house that night. And he needed to talk to them. He needed to talk to the people of Takayama. Or the kami needed to talk to the people of Takayama through this boy, Yukichi. And so people gathered, and the kami had told everyone that before the kami would begin speaking, everyone who came had to gather together, and they all had to chant Kanzeon 108 times together. And so once the local people had gathered and had chanted Kanzeon 108 times, then the kami began to speak. And after speaking for a while, the kami informed everyone that there was more. So they should all come back the following night. So once again, they came back the following night. Everyone chanted the Kanzeon 108 times, and then the kami. In his telling of the story, Hakuin gives some detail about exactly what the kami said. But since this goes on I'm getting up to the third night, which is kind of the climax. And at the end of the second night's teaching from the kami, the kami says, I had only planned to speak for 2 nights, but now I've decided to extend my visit. And so everyone should come back again tomorrow night. So everyone came back for the third night and again chanted the Kanzeon together for 108 times. And then the kami, and I think I'm getting this right, I think it was on the third night when the kami started to talk about Mr. What was his name again? Oh yeah, Sosuke, Mr. Sosuke. and about Hakuin as well. And so the kami explained that what had happened was that having received his certificate, Mr. Sosuke mistakenly thought that this meant that he was enlightened now and that he could do whatever he wanted. As a great enlightened being, and then the kami began to explain that any kind of realization that we have is not the end of our practice, but is rather the beginning of practice. And that this was the mistake that Mr. Sosuke had made. Even though he had had a genuine realization, breakthrough, kensho, satori, whatever you want to call it, that he thought he was done when really that was just the beginning. And then then the kami also explained that just as Mr. Sosuke had made this mistake, the people of Takayama had also made a big mistake in thinking that the fault lay with Hakuin, and in particular in no longer practicing the Kanzeon chant. And so this is a major theme of Hakuin's teaching, and it's not just in this one weird story that he told. And there are actually people have found newspaper reports or whatever kind of whatever the equivalent was in mid 18th century Takayama in Japan. This is all, let's see, so, and at this point in Hakuin's life, he's in his 60s, maybe even 70s. So it's in the late mid 1700s, if I'm getting my dates right. But there are newspaper reports that indicate, something like this happened in the city of Takayama. And so Hakuin and the kami emphasized this, which Hakuin did emphasize in his teaching. He emphasized the importance of having kensho, having some great realization. But I think there's a much more general a point to be made. You don't have to have kensho. You don't have to have a certificate. In fact, in some ways, this story illustrates how getting a certificate can be a big problem. If you get a certificate, get some sort of validation, get some sort of approval in your teaching and in your practice from a teacher, that can lead to big problems. But you don't have to, in order to have that kind of a problem. We all get some kind of validation. We all get some kind of response, some kind of positive feeling from our practice. And I can say that. I can say that with great confidence because we're here. Why else would we be here? Many people are interested in meditation or Zen or Buddhism. But I think that I think that those of us who have some sort of good feeling or positive response or positive benefit that we receive from our practice, and who, in addition to having some benefit that we receive from our practice, it's also necessary. There's two other things are necessary. One is that we realize that the benefit comes from our practice. But then the next step is to realize that since our practice has been beneficial, we should keep doing it. Which sounds very simple, but But it's very easy to obtain some benefit from any kind of practice. It's like saving up your money. And then now you have money because you've been saving it. And then you spend it because you stopped saving it. And now it's gone. In fact, it's actually a lot like that. It's like working all week and then getting your paycheck and blowing it over the weekend. And the thing that's quite interesting is that Hakuin presents this story of Mr. Sosuke and the boy Yukichi in the city of Takayama. He presents his story in terms of what Hakuin called post-Satori practice. So Satori is, some sort of, awakening, big realization that you can have through your practice. So Hakuin placed a great deal of emphasis on having these big breakthroughs. But then he also placed a great deal of emphasis on continuing to practice after having a big breakthrough. And what is the practice after having a big breakthrough? Well, it's pretty much the same as the practice before having the big breakthrough. In fact, it's basically saying if your practice has led to some sort of realization or some sort of benefit or some sort of good thing, keep doing it. Which sounds so obvious, and yet it's very easy to it sounds so obvious, but so does save your money or don't blow all your money on the weekend. Those also sound obvious, but it's very easy to forget about these very good common sense advice. And so not only does this teaching apply before you have a great awakening, it also applies if you never have a great awakening. If you're striving for something in your practice, that can be a good thing, actually. That can be an encouragement. That can be a reason to get up in the morning, a reason to go to retreats, a reason to work hard, with your teacher. That can be a very motivating thing. But whether a breakthrough comes or not, you have to keep doing your practice. All right, which is one of the reasons why I read this quote from Wonhyo at the beginning. In Zen teaching in particular, there's a lot of kind of non-dual mumbo jumbo about don't try to get anything, don't try to do anything, don't try this, don't try that, don't be attached to results, don't try to get results, blah blah blah, which is it's a valid teaching as far as it goes, but then what? So Wonhyo's answer to then what? I'm just going to read this one more time at the end. Since there is no path to be traversed, there is no way in which to cultivate one's mind. Since there is nothing to be used as a gate, one cannot walk through it. Yet even though the ocean itself has no ford, people can cross over it with a boat and an oar. Also, even though the sky does not have a ladder, birds spread their wings and fly high above. By this we know that pathless path means that anything can be a path. Gateless gate indicates that anything can be a gate. Since there is nothing that is not a gate, each and every phenomenon can be a gate to lead to the mystery. Since there is nothing that is not a path, each and every place becomes the road leading back to the origin. Thank you for listening.